your friendly neighborhood host, JT Wheatley, back again for another episode of the History of Comics podcast. And once again with part 4 of the life of Joe Kubert. When we last left off, Joe Kubert had established the Joe Kubert School for comic book illustration and was also setting off new exciting projects when sadly his friends, the Rust Magics, particularly Irvin Rust Magic, his comic book colleague over in Europe, had grown into some dangerous trouble. Irvin Rust Magic and his family found themselves trapped in the Bosnian War. The last time the Kuberts saw them was in 1992, as they located to Holland to stay safe. However, soon after the Kuberts returned to America, Rust Magic had faxed him to say he and his family had returned to Sarajevo against his better judgment, as they were homesick. It was the worst possible time to do so, as the region erupted into an ethnic civil war, notable for Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic's ethnic cleansing policy. He would later earn the name the Butcher of the Balkans. It resulted in Sarajevo being under siege for 4 years, the longest in modern history. On April 10th, the Kuberts received their first fax from Rust Magic, stating the family was safe but terrified from the war. It will be the first of many faxes detailing their experiences. It made watching the events on TV more personal, especially when the atrocity of the ethnic cleansing and rape camps were reported. Rust Magic paid to get Jews out of Sarajevo to do his reports. It especially hit Joe Kubert hard, being a Jew from Poland who was shocked that something like this could happen again after the Holocaust, especially as the United Nations declared they couldn't get involved in the Civil War. Eventually, the Rust Magics would make it to the newly formed country of Slovenia, though Irvin's mother died in the hospital when the Serbian forces took over. The Kuberts visited him in September of 1993. It was not only an emotional reunion, but one with purpose. Kubert wanted to detail Rust Magic's experience through his faxes into the graphic novel. Joe Kubert made Facts from Sarajevo from Rust Magic's experiences in the Bosnian War, which he wrote with Muriel, who was a character in the book as she was the one that received the faxes. The comic would focus on Irvin's perspective, covering 12 chapters of him and his family trying to escape, all while experiencing the horrors of war, from a sniper killing children to a tank destroying their home. There is even a tie in the comic books, as due to the conflict, Irvin lost his great deal of his original comic book art he had collected over the years, which included Prince Valiant and even the work of Joe Kubert, from whom both Rust Magic's home and the SAF office was destroyed during the war. The project took 2 years and ended up being 207 pages in hardcover, which was published at Dark Horse in November of 1996. It would be later released in a 224 paperback format. It was soon acclaimed worldwide and throughout the media, such as Publishers Weekly, The Village Voice, and Booklist. Facts from Sarajevo, we won the Harvey and Eisner for Best Graphic Novel and the Bob Clampett Humanitarian Award on July 17, 1997, along with numerous others, becoming one of the most acclaimed comic books of that year. All of this was done by Joe Kubert at the age of 70. However, he still maintained a low-tech lifestyle and using the same Bristol board his parents bought him as a child, but his art had never been better. Meanwhile, Kubert's telegraphics company at the school started to produce PS, Preventative Maintenance Monthly, the U.S. instructional magazine that stressed the importance of care of weapons, vehicles, and equipment in the comic strip form, originally created by Will Eisner. It was run by Peter Carlson, who specialized in computer coloring, with Joe Kubert providing much of the art himself. Telegraphics took up several basement rooms at JKS and Dover High School, employing media students there. It will be another feature to be attracting burgeoning comic book artists to the school, as not only did they get to learn, but they got to work as well, turning it into a true magnet school. Joe Kubert would later meet Irvin Rust Magic again at the Lucca Convention in 1997 and work with Sergio Bonelli on Tex, The Lonesome Rider, a 224-page epic with Claude Nizzi, which he wrote. It was based on the classic Tex Willer Italian series, a Western strip about a ranger fighting for justice in the Old West. Sergio's father, Gianluigi Bonelli, originally co-created the character back in 1948 with Aurelio Gallipini. The book was published in black and white in Europe in 2001. It later planned to be colorized in America in 2005 for Dark Horse, but later decided to keep it in its black and white format, as that was what served the art best. While working on text, Joe kept busy with side projects, such as in 1996, Joe Kubert did Batman Black and White with Bruce Timm on the story of The Hunt, while also continuing to do covers for DC, such as Batman and Detective Comics. He also worked with Stan Lee for his Just Imagine run at DC for his Batman comic. Then, Superheroes, Joe Kubert's Wonderful World comic was released at DC, his instruction book on how to create powerful comic book characters. Unique among the genre of the instruction manuals, but in typical Kubert fashion, it emphasized the need for hard work and how demanding the job was. In 2003, Yossel, April 19, 1943, was released by Joe Kubert. In the story, he imagined what his life would have been if his family had never immigrated from Poland and they became trapped in the Holocaust. He did the art in pencil renderings, as Joe Kubert wanted to convey these images in Yossel's mind and probably wouldn't have had a chance to put them on paper. Telling the story how Yossel used his drawing skill to survive the concentration camp, it will be highly praised, though some criticize the use of comic books to tell a story about the Holocaust. Strange is forgetting that Mouse, by Art Spiegelman, did the exact same thing, and that book won the Pulitzer. Kubert actually completed the book in 2000, but it would take until 2003 before it was released. Sadly, during this time, Kubert's longtime collaborator, Robert Knyer, passed away in 2002, leaving behind a legacy as one of comic books' most prolific writers. On December 6, 2003, Joe Kubert attended an evening with Joe Kubert at the Park Sky Shoal on 9th Street, in part to promote the release of Yossel, and another as he also returned to Sergeant Rock with Sergeant Rock Between Hell and a Hard Place, in which with writer Brian Azzarello. Karen Berger, the editor at DC's Vertigo, originally proposed the idea to Kubert as a 12-issue miniseries, but Joe instead proposed it as a hardcover book. Berger agreed as long as it was at least 140 to 150 pages and asked how long it would take. Kubert said it would take at least a year, with, of course, him doing the pencils, inks, and colors, which he did with brush and watercolor, but requested someone else to write it. Karen Berger suggested Brian Azzarello, who Kubert had read and agreed to. The announcement of the Vertigo DC was met with immediate praise from fans. While Joe Kubert enjoyed working with Azzarello, he did object to some of the blue language, being an older man. It did give Kubert a chance to try condensing storytelling, as each page contained 6 panels. The story was a murder mystery in the French Hudson Forest, in which 3 out of 4 German officers are killed, and the only person who could have done it was clearly in the squad. It was set to see who in Sergeant Rock's company committed the crime. The book would be positively reviewed, though some would complain about the ending. It ultimately showed that Kubert's art had lost none of its magic, returning to his classic character. In fact, more than a few argued it was even better, if that was possible. Back at the school, JKS added Saturday morning cartooning classes for children, though Kubert was quick not to take credit for that, pointing to the innovation of his instructors, showing how the school was finally starting to run itself without its creator. On January 3, 2005, Kubert would reel from the death of his friend and colleague Will Eisner, and now realized he was the last of the great Golden Age artists, thus making him the grand old man in the comic book medium. 2005 did see the release of Jew Gangster by Joe Kubert, his second Jewish-themed graphic novel, this time taking another alternative history, imagining if he had followed the criminal route as a young Jewish kid in America. Kubert related it to real-life stories of growing up in New York City, with more than a few friends he knew were connected. After Jew Gangster, Joe Kubert's next work was Sergeant Rock, The Prophecy, returning to the classic character again, but doing the writing himself for a change. The comic was based on the true story of an Orthodox Jewish rabbi who was spirited out of Europe to America to warn of the coming Holocaust, believing if the Allies and the general public knew of the coming horrors, it would shorten the war. In the comic, Sergeant Rock and Easy Company were tasked with retrieving the rabbi, only to be trapped between the Germans and the Russians. The 6-issue miniseries was later collected into a graphic novel. Joe Kubert also contributed to the What If Tomorrow in 9/11, Volume 2 for DC, as a tribute to the first responders, with all profits going to the 9/11 charitable funds. Kubert's story contrasted the events with the other tragedies in history, from Holocaust to the Civil Rights Movement, showing the worst in humanity, but as with 9/11, how the best also respond in kind. Joe Kubert made another venture into politics when he and Raphael Madoff, Ph.D., who was the director of the David Hyman Institute of Holocaust Studies, wrote a letter on February 8, 2006, in defense of the Danish cartoonist who made a strip offensive to Muslims in the paper, Jyllands-Posten, that resulted in riots and death threats against the paper and its artist. Joe Kubert himself sat on the Board of Arts and Letters at the Holocaust Institute, and their letter is a brilliant defense of free speech, citing numerous examples of cartoons discriminating against various religions, including one they ran in Rutgers University paper, The Medium, depicting a frightened Jew on a carnival-like platform over an oven with the caption, "Knock a Jew in the oven." While Kubert and Madoff pointed out that each example was horrific, censorship was even worse. Plus, they pointed out that these cartoons appeared in private papers outside the control of the government, whereas many anti-Semitic cartoons appeared in government-controlled papers in many Muslim countries. While Kubert never became extremely wealthy, he was always financially secure and he had worked consistently since the age of 14. He claimed to be the luckiest man in the world. In 2006, he did a 6-part Thor series for DC, with JKS turning 30 that fall, with Joe Kubert himself joking he never thought the school would even last that long. Muriel started to help run the school at home while her daughter-in-law, Debbie Kubert, the wife of their son David, assumed the role of on-site management. Also, that July, he and Muriel celebrated the 55th wedding anniversary. Andy and Adam began teaching at the school in 2002 and 2005, and they both made headlines when they left Marvel for DC in an exclusive contract. The previous year, Sin City the movie personally thanked Joe Kubert as an inspiration, which is notable since Frank Miller has always called Joe Kubert the godfather of comic book noir. Sadly, in 2008, Joe's wife Muriel would pass away. Joe Kubert would follow a few years later, dying at the August 12th from multiple melanoma at the age of 86. He is survived by his 5 children and numerous grandchildren, with more than a few following the footsteps of the comic book field. While we have already talked numerous times about Andy and Adam, Joe Kubert's granddaughter and their niece, Katie Kubert, has also worked as a comic book editor since 2011, having graduated from Boston University in 2006 with a Bachelor of Science in Art History and Film Study. Katie Kubert has worked in both DC and Marvel, and like the rest of the family, is notable with helping with the Batgirl revival in 2011. Andy and Adam Kubert still continue their successful comic book careers for DC and Marvel, remaining 2 of the top artists in the comic book medium today, while also continuing to teach at the Joe Kubert School like their father did until his death. JKS continues to be the premier comic book artist school in the country, if not the world, attracting students from far away as Japan and Malaysia, with undergrad class of 150. The school continues to produce notable alumni, of course, being Andy and Andy Kubert, and the ones spoken before, but also such as Lee Weeks, Andy Price, and Scott Collins. Of course, Joe Kubert's personal and professional legacy cannot be underestimated. From the age of 14 to his death, he produced a diverse range of work, from Hawkman to Sergeant Rock. While he never had that breakout hit like Batman or Spider-Man, his professional lifestyle and hard work made him an inspiration to comic artists to this day. Frank Miller still cites him as one of his favorites. It will result in respect of his peers and successors with numerous awards. Joe Kubert ended up being inducted into Harvey's Jack Kirby Hall of Fame in 1997, followed by the Will Eisner Comic Hall of Fame in 1998, and then the Milton Caniff Lifetime Achievement Award in 2009 from the National Cartoonist Society. In 2015, he was inducted posthumously into the Joe Sinnott Hall of Fame from Inkwell Awards, with his grandson, Orion Zingara, and a JKS graduate, receiving it on his family's behalf. It is a well-earned legacy created not just by Joe Kubert's talent, but his dedication to hard work, setting an example of what a true comic book professional should be. Simply put, Joe Kubert was the rock of the comic book industry, and there will never be another like him. I would like to thank my chief source for these episodes, Man of Rock, a biography of Joe Kubert by Bill Shelley, which covers everything from his birthplace to his last days. A great read with a nice collection of photos and art throughout his career. A must-read for any comic book fan. And now is August 21st, 2025, time for the favorite comic of the week. G.I. Joe, number 10 by Joshua Williamson and Andrea Molina, which is another great addition in the series that finds CoverGirl and Baroness fighting Bear and Blood for their lives, all while Clutch and the Hound, his new Autobot friend, do some investigating of their own, only for someone else to tag along. Williamson once again has a lot of fun playing with the G.I. Joe universe and also the Transformer universe as we're seeing them start to really come together. And the Clutch and Hound scenes are really great because it's naturally the mechanic of the G.I. Joes ends up being the one to make a friend with the Autobots. And their dynamics are a lot of fun. Also, they have some nice twist in here. And it's matched by Molina's gorgeous art, which has a nice mix of being kind of cartoony and gritty, which is perfect for like a military series. It also has a lot of sci-fi in it too. So yeah, you have a little outlandish angle to it, but it's just a lot of fun, great action, and a killer splash page that really makes you chomping at the bit for the next issue.
All in all, just a great read in general. Another prime example why the Infinite Universe is the best new universe in comics in a long time. And with that, well, we conclude with the reposting of the archive edition of the life of the late great Joe Kubert. Join me again next week for another series of the archive editions. I should note that I've actually completed the script for the next 3 episodes of the next new season. I have to bank at least 10 bank before I could this new season. But we'll keep going with the archive editions for here, and also updating my favorite comic books and so forth, and of course some reviews and things like that. Well, until then, go enjoy yourself a good comic book. And at this point, just if it's anything with the Energized Universe, pick it up because they're the best comic books, the most fun out in the all together right now.